Midnight Echoes.
I travel for work about 200 days a year. You get used to hotels. You get used to the generic art, the smell of industrial carpet cleaner, and the muffled sounds of people in the hallway. Usually, I sleep like the dead. But this night in 2018, at an older hotel in downtown Cleveland, was different. I checked in late, around 1 a.m. My flight had been delayed twice, and I was running on fumes. The night clerk seemed just as tired as I was, lazily handing me a key card for room 412. "Last room on the floor," he mumbled. "Quiet corner." Perfect. I got up to the room, dumped my bag, and immediately noticed the adjoining door. You know the type, a heavy wooden door locked from both sides, meant to connect two rooms for families. I hate them. They always let more sound through than a regular wall. I jiggled the handle on my side. It was locked tight, the deadbolt engaged. Satisfied, I stripped down, brushed my teeth, and crashed into bed. The room was dead silent. I must have fallen asleep instantly, but I woke up abruptly a few hours later. The red digital numbers on the bedside clock read 3:33 a.m. I lay there in the dark, wondering what woke me up. The silence felt heavier now, thicker. Then I heard it. It was faint, coming from room 414, the other side of the connecting door. It sounded like weeping. Not loud, hysterical crying, but a low, consistent, wet sobbing. It was the sound of someone trying desperately to be quiet. I felt a pang of sympathy. Thin walls. Someone was having a bad night. I tried to roll over and ignore it, but the sound was relentless. After about 10 minutes, the crying abruptly stopped. It didn't taper off. It was cut off instantly mid-sob. Silence returned. But now, I was wide awake, staring at the ceiling, straining my ears. Then came the voices. Two of them. They were whispering, but it was an intense, aggressive whisper, like air being forced through gritted teeth. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was violent. One voice sounded deeper, male perhaps. The other was the one who had been crying. Great, I thought. A domestic dispute at 3:45 in the morning. I reached for the hotel phone to call the front desk just to ask them to do a quiet wellness check. But as my hand touched the receiver, the arguing stopped. A loud thud shook the wall. It sounded like a body being thrown against the headboard on the other side. I froze, hand hovering over the phone. I waited for a scream, a shout, anything. Nothing. Absolute, suffocating silence. I sat up in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. My eyes were fixed on that connecting door in the dim light coming from the window curtains. 5 minutes passed. 10. The silence was worse than the arguing. My mind started spiraling. Did I just hear someone get knocked unconscious? Did I hear something worse? I was about to pick up the phone again when I heard the sound that changed my fear from concern for a neighbor to pure self-preservation. Click. It was the sound of the deadbolt on the other side of the connecting door being slowly disengaged. I stopped breathing. I stared at the brass handle on my side of the door. Very slowly, almost imperceptibly, the round brass knob began to turn. It turned to the right, hit the resistance of my locked deadbolt, held there for a second, and then slowly turned back to the center. Someone was trying to get in. I knew I should yell. I knew I should grab the phone. But primal fear is a paralyzing thing. I felt like if I made a sound, if I acknowledged that I was awake, the person on the other side would snap. I slid out of bed, moving as silently as I could onto the cold carpet. I crouched down beside the bed, my eyes never leaving the door. The handle turned again. Harder this time. A little faster. Then it jiggled just barely. Then silence again. I don't know what possessed me to do it. Maybe I needed to know if someone was actually standing there, or if I was losing my mind. I got down on my hands and knees and crawled across the carpet toward the connecting door. The gap at the bottom was wide, maybe an inch between the wood and the carpet. I pressed my cheek to the itchy carpet and looked under the door into room 414. The room next door was dark, but there was enough ambient city light coming through their window for me to see the floor. I saw feet. 2 bare feet, pale in the darkness, were standing right there, facing my door. They were motionless. I scuttled backward on my hands and knees like a crab, scrambling until my back hit the far wall. I grabbed my cell phone from the nightstand and bolted into the bathroom, locking the door behind me. I sat in the empty tub, shaking uncontrollably, and called 911. I whispered everything to the dispatcher. They said officers were on the way and to stay locked in the bathroom. I sat in that tub for 20 minutes, straining to hear sounds over the rush of my own blood in my ears. At one point, I swear I heard a soft scratching sound on the bedroom side of the bathroom door, like a fingernail tracing the wood grain, but I can't be sure. When the police finally arrived, they knocked on my main door. I let them in. I was a mess. They went to room 414. They knocked. No answer. They used the master key. I stood in the hallway while they cleared the room. After a minute, an officer came out. "Sir, are you sure it was this room?" he asked. "Yes," I said, my voice trembling. I heard them arguing. I saw their feet under the door. The officer shook his head. "Room 414 is empty. Housekeeping cleaned it yesterday afternoon.
No one checked into it tonight.
The bed hasn't even been slept in." I demanded they check again. I showed them the gap under the door. I told them about the deadbolt clicking. They found nothing. No sign of forced entry, no luggage, no people. I packed my bag in 30 seconds and checked out. I drove to the airport 4 hours early and just sat at the gate. I know what I heard, and I know what I saw. Someone was standing on the other side of that door, immobile, just waiting for me to unlock my side. The police said the room was empty, but they didn't check the closet. And they didn't look under the bed in room 414. I think about that every time I get a room with a connecting door now. I always push the dresser in front of it before I go to sleep. In the summer of 2015, I was driving cross-country on Route 50 in Nevada, the loneliest road in America. It lives up to the name. I had pushed myself too hard, driving until my eyes were blurring. Around 2 a.m., with my gas tank hovering above empty, I saw a neon sign flickering in the vast desert darkness. The Stardust Motel? Vacancy. It was one of those ancient, single-story roadside places laid out in an L shape around a gravel parking lot. It looked awful, but I was desperate. I pulled in. Mine was the only car besides a rusted-out pickup truck near the office. The lobby smelled intensely of stale coffee and floral air freshener, trying to mask something else, maybe mold. Behind the counter sat a man. He was impossibly thin, with skin that looked like crumpled parchment paper. He didn't look up when the door chimed. He was staring intently at a small, fuzzy black and white TV displaying static.
"Need a room," I said.
He slowly turned his head. His eyes were enormous, bulging slightly from their sockets, and rimmed with red. He didn't blink. "Just one tonight." His voice was like dry leaves skittering on pavement.
"Yeah."
"Just me. Just for sleep." He processed my card slowly, his long fingers tapping the keys with agonizing deliberation. Then, he slid a physical metal key across the Formica counter. Room 9. Before I could take it, his hand shot out and covered the key. He leaned forward, his eyes widening even further. "Rules," he whispered. 3 rules for the Stardust. I was too tired to argue. Okay, what are they? Number 1, keep the bathroom door closed. The pipes, they sing if you leave it open. Okay. Weird plumbing.
Fine.
Number 2, if the phone rings, do not answer it. We do not have phones in the rooms anymore, but sometimes it still rings. A chill ran down my spine. I nodded slowly. And number 3, he leaned in so close I could smell his breath, which smelled like raw meat. Between the hours of 3 a.m. and 3:15 a.m., do not look out your front window. Do not open the curtains. Do not look at the parking lot, no matter what you hear. He stared at me, waiting for confirmation. Okay. I won't, I said, snatching the key. I drove my car down to room 9. The room was exactly what I expected. Wood paneling, a Saga mattress, and a rattling AC unit. I checked for a phone. There wasn't one. I made sure the bathroom door was firmly shut. I threw myself onto the bed, fully clothed, and passed out. I woke up choking on dry air. The AC unit had died. The room was stiflingly hot and dead silent. I checked my phone. 3:03 a.m. My heart jumped. I remembered the rules. I lay there, sweating in the heat, trying to go back to sleep. That's when the sound started outside. It was a rhythmic, wet slapping sound on the gravel parking lot. Slap, drag, slap, drag. It sounded heavy, like something large limping slowly past my door. I held my breath. The sound stopped right in front of room 9. Then came a scratching noise against the door. Not knocking, scratching, like a large dog trying to dig its way in. Don't look, I told myself. The weird guy is probably just messing with you. The scratching stopped. Then, a sound that I can only describe as a gurgling moan echoed just outside the window. It didn't sound human. It didn't sound like an animal, either. It sounded wet and deep. The temptation to look was agonizing. It's human nature. When told not to see something, it's all you want to do. The sound moved away slightly. Slap, drag. I couldn't take it. I had to know if someone was hurt out there, or if I was being pranked. I slid off the bed and crept to the window. The heavy, rubber-backed curtains were drawn tight. I reached out a shaking hand and pulled back the edge of the curtain just an inch. The parking lot was bathed in the sickly orange glow of the sodium vapor street lamp. In the center of the lot, about 20 feet from my door, was a figure. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, but it was hunched over. It was naked, its skin a pale, glistening gray in the orange light. Its limbs were too long, jointed incorrectly. As I watched, it slowly raised its arms toward the sky in a jerky, unnatural motion. It began to sway back and forth. And then, its head, which was completely smooth, with no face, just a smooth indentation where features should be, snapped toward my window. It didn't have eyes, but I knew it saw me. I dropped the curtain and scrambled backward, falling over the bedside table. As I hit the floor, the bedside lamp, which I hadn't turned on and which wasn't plugged in, began to ring. It was the shrill, mechanical ring of an old rotary phone emanating from the light bulb itself. I screamed and scrambled into the bathroom, slamming the door. I sat against the door, sobbing, until the sun came up. When I finally worked up the courage to come out, It was 7 a.m. The parking lot was empty. I threw my stuff in the car and sped to the office to drop the key. The thin man was still there, staring at the static TV. I slammed the key on the counter. "I'm leaving." He didn't turn his head. He just smiled, a wide, toothless grin that stretched too far across his face. "You looked," he whispered to the TV. "They don't like it when you look." I didn't even ask for my receipt. I drove until I hit Utah. I don't drive at night anymore. And I never, ever stop at motels with neon signs. My cousin was getting married at the Grand Hawthorne Hotel in Chicago. It's one of those massive, roaring 20s era places. Gold leaf ceilings, marble pillars, and a history thick enough to choke on. It's beautiful, but it always gave me the creeps. It feels like too many things have happened there. Because of the wedding block, the hotel was fully booked. When I checked in, the concierge, a sharply dressed woman who looked stressed, apologized. "Mr. Davis, we're overbooked on standard rooms. We've had to upgrade you to a junior suite on the 8th floor." I didn't complain. A suite is a suite. "Just a warning," she added, lowering her voice. "The east wing of the 8th floor is currently undergoing some light renovations. It might be a little dusty in the hall, and it's very quiet up there right now." I took the elevator up. It was an old brass and iron cage elevator that jerked and shuddered. When the doors opened on 8, the change in atmosphere was immediate. The lower floors were bustling with wedding guests and staff. The 8th floor was dead silent. The carpet was covered in plastic sheeting, and the wallpaper was half stripped in places, revealing dark plaster underneath. The air smelled intensely of old dust, sawdust, and something else, something sweet and cloying, like stale pipe tobacco. My room, 819, was at the very end of a long, dimly lit corridor. The room itself was huge and hadn't been touched by the renovations yet. It was like stepping into 1930. Heavy velvet drapes, antique furniture, and a massive 4-poster bed. It was impressive but cold. The first night, Friday, was the rehearsal dinner downstairs. I came back up around midnight, a little tipsy. The elevator ride up seemed to take much longer than it should have. When I stepped onto the 8th floor, the tobacco smell was overwhelming, thick like smoke in the air, though I saw no one. As I walked down the long, plastic-covered hallway to my room, I heard music. It was faint, coming from behind one of the closed doors of a room that was supposed to be empty for construction. It sounded like old, scratchy jazz, a muted trumpet, and a tinny piano. I paused outside the door it was coming from, room 812. I put my ear to the wood. The music stopped instantly. I told myself it was a construction worker pulling a late shift, listening to the radio. I went to bed. Saturday was the wedding. It went late. I didn't get back to my room until 2 a.m. I was exhausted. I collapsed into that massive bed and fell into a deep, alcohol-fueled sleep. I woke up because of the cold. The room was freezing. I could see my breath huffing in the air above me. The digital thermostat on the wall was dead blank. Then I realized the room was different. It was subtle at first. The heavy velvet drapes, which I had closed tightly, were now open. Moonlight streamed in. The electric lamps on the bedside tables were gone, replaced by older, oil lamp-style fixtures that were lit, casting flickering shadows. And the smell. The tobacco smoke was so thick now it was stinging my eyes. I sat up, my heart pounding. I looked toward the corner of the room, near the window. There was a high-backed leather armchair there that hadn't been there when I checked in. And someone was sitting in it. It was a man. He was facing away from me, looking out the window at the city below. He was wearing a dark suit, the cut of it looking decades out of date. Smoke curled up from a cigar held in a hand resting on the chair arm. "Excuse me?" My voice came out as a pathetic squeak.
Who are you?
"How did you get in here?" The man didn't move. He just took a long drag from the cigar. Then, very slowly, he began to turn his head toward me. The movement was jerky, like stop-motion animation. As his profile came into view, I saw the side of his face. It was wrong. The skin was gray and slack, hanging loosely off the bone. His eye socket was just a dark, empty pit. I didn't wait for him to turn fully. The fight-or-flight response kicked in hard. I threw the covers off, grabbed my phone off the nightstand, and bolted for the door in my boxer shorts and t-shirt. I fumbled with the lock, my hands shaking violently. Behind me, I heard the leather chair creak as the man stood up. I got the door open and sprinted down the plastic-covered hallway. I didn't wait for the elevator. I slammed through the emergency stairwell door and ran down 8 flights of stairs barefoot. I burst into the lobby at 3:30 a.m., panting, half-naked, looking like a maniac. The night staff was horrified. I refused to go back up. I made them get my stuff the next day. I ended up sleeping on my cousin's floor in their bridal suite for the rest of the night. When I checked out, the same concierge was there. She looked at my disheveled state and the terror in my eyes. She didn't ask what happened. She just quietly wiped the charges for the suite off my bill. "We'll close off the East Wing entirely," was all she said. I found out later that the 8th floor used to be the residential wing for people who lived in the hotel full-time back in the 30s. A lot of people died in those rooms over the years. Some natural, some not. I think for a few hours that night, the hotel forgot what year it was, and I was just a guest in someone else's time. You always hear the urban legends. The hook on the car door, the killer in the back seat. And yeah, the man under the hotel bed. You never think they're true. They're just stories to scare kids at slumber parties. Until it happens to you. Last October, I was driving solo from Texas to Colorado to visit my sister. I like road trips alone, the freedom, the podcasts, the junk food. I usually book chains, but around 11 p.m., somewhere in northern New Mexico, I was falling asleep at the wheel. The next exit had one of those generic 2-story motor inns. Not a dump, but definitely not a Hilton. I just needed 6 hours of sleep. I checked in. The guy at the desk was normal. The lobby was bright. I got a room on the 2nd floor, overlooking the back parking lot. The room was standard. 2 queen beds, a floral comforter that probably hadn't been washed in a decade, and the smell of industrial lemon cleaner trying to hide the smell of stale cigarettes. I did my usual routine. Locked the deadbolt.
Put the chain on.
Checked the bathroom. I even pulled back the shower curtain, a habit from watching too many horror movies. It was empty. I threw my suitcase on the luggage rack and plopped down on the bed closest to the door. I scrolled through my phone for a bit, texted my sister I was stopping, and then decided to brush my teeth and crash. Here's the thing about instinct. Sometimes your brain notices things before you do. When I came out of the bathroom, the room felt different. The air felt heavier. I looked around. My suitcase was still on the rack. My keys were still on the nightstand. But the second bed, the one further from the door near the window, caught my eye. The heavy floral bedspread was slightly rumpled near the bottom corner. Just a little bit, like someone had brushed against it. You're being paranoid, I told myself. Housekeeping was just sloppy. I walked over to my bed to plug in my phone charger. As I leaned down to plug it into the outlet behind the nightstand, I dropped the charging block. It bounced on the carpet, and rolled underneath my bed. With a sigh of annoyance, I got down on my hands and knees. I put my cheek against the scratchy hotel carpet and looked under the bed frame to find it. The space under a hotel bed is usually a black void of dust bunnies and lost hair ties. But the parking lot lights outside were bright enough to cast a sliver of light across the floor. I saw my charger. I reached for it, and then my eyes adjusted to the shadows further back. Under the other bed, the one near the window, I wasn't looking at dust bunnies. I was looking into eyes. There was a man wedged under the second bed. He was lying perfectly flat on his stomach, facing me. He was dressed in dark clothes, wearing a black beanie. His face was filthy, smeared with grease or dirt, and his eyes were wide open, staring directly into mine from across the 6-foot gap between the beds. He wasn't blinking. He wasn't moving. He was just watching me. My brain broke. For a second, I couldn't process what I was seeing. It had to be a hallucination. A pile of blankets that looked like a person. Then the man blinked, and the corners of his mouth slowly curled up into a horrifying, silent smile. The scream that came out of me didn't even sound human. It was pure, primal terror. I scrambled backward on my hands and feet, scraping my knees on the carpet. I didn't stand up. I just lunged for the door. I fumbled with the chain lock, my hands shaking so violently I couldn't get the metal tab out of the slot. Behind me, I heard the ch-ch-ch clump sound of someone sliding out from under a bed and standing up. I ripped the chain off the wall, screws and all, yanked the deadbolt open, and threw myself into the outdoor hallway. I didn't have shoes on. I didn't have my phone or my keys. I just ran, screaming, down the concrete stairs to the lobby. The night clerk looked up, terrified, as I burst in, hysterical. He locked the lobby doors and called 911. When the police arrived, the man was gone. But they found how he got in. The window latch on the second bed had been broken from the outside. He had climbed in while I was checking in at the front desk. They found his kit under the bed where he had been waiting. A roll of duct tape, zip ties, and a hunting knife. He had been under there the whole time. When I came in, when I sat on the other bed 5 feet away from him to check my phone, when I brushed my teeth, he was just lying there in the dust, waiting for me to turn off the lights. If I hadn't dropped my phone charger, I never would have seen him. I would have gone to sleep in that room. I don't stay in motels with outdoor corridors anymore. And the first thing I do in any hotel room, no matter how fancy, is get down on my hands and knees and check under the damn bed.